Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alexis Alvarez Bartholomew, and I am here to welcome you to Fair Housing, Immigrant Rights, Fair Housing for Immigrants. We called it Diversive Homes and Inclusive Rights. Thank you for coming today. For those of you who are just joining us for the first time, this is a training series. This training series dates back to sometime in April, where we began with our fair housing basics and have moved through different topics within fair housing to where we are here today. So for those of you who are here for the first time, welcome aboard. For those of you who have been here through sessions 1 and sessions 2, welcome back. Thank you for continuing to join us on our fair housing journey. As always, housekeeping announcements. This is being recorded, and a copy of the recording will be sent to all of you who are here and those who registered. That recording will come to you in an email from Zoom, not from my email address, but I will pop my email address into the chat. If you need anything along the way, don't see that email in your inbox, you can always reach out to me directly. Additionally, CLE credit. This has been approved for CLE credit. I believe it's one general CLE credit from the Florida Bar. I've mentioned this in previous parts of the training series, but each installment of this training series has its own CLE code, its own CLE credit. So at the end of today's discussion, I will announce that CLE code out loud. I will also put it into the chat. And don't worry, it will also come to you along with that recording and that email from Zoom in about 24 hours after the event. It automatically goes out through Zoom around noontime tomorrow. Third piece of housekeeping announcements, probably my most favorite of the boring housekeeping announcements, are questions and answers. All of you who have joined us so far throughout the sessions have just been stellar at engaging in conversation, putting questions in. Those of you who know at the end, if we have time, I usually will let folks come off mute and ask questions. So please keep it up. I think it's probably Joe, Pia, and my favorite part of all of this is hearing from you and being able to engage with you. Final piece of housekeeping, normally I go through the introductions of my speakers when I have a webinar, but because this is a series and it is like a 6-part series, instead of reading the bios of our speakers out loud every time, what I've done is I have popped them into the chat. You should see the bios for our speakers, Joseph Cordova and Pia Molina. And finally, just to mention, Joseph and Pia are colleagues of mine at FLS, go FLS. Very proud to work with you all at Florida Legal Services, honored to share this platform with you. And I am going to turn it over to you to get started on our fair housing rights for immigrants conversation here today. Thank you, Joe, thank you, Pia, and thank you all for joining. Floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Alexis. We appreciate you having us and everyone who's attending today. And I'm going to hand it over to Pia and we'll get started.
Thank you. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So today we're going to be talking about immigrants and the Fair Housing Act. So to get started, these are some questions that might, make your ears perk up when it comes to immigrants in fair housing. So sorry, we don't rent to families with children. This apartment isn't going to work with your disability. Sorry, you need a social security number to rent here. This neighborhood probably isn't right for you. So these are just phrases that maybe sound benign or sound like there's nothing going on here, but they could be potentially a violation or leading to a violation, a fair housing violation. But we will have the slides both in English and Spanish today, and I'll just be going over the English language ones. But when it's also available. So like I said, these phrases may be a violation of the Fair Housing Act. And for those of you who have been here, we are going to just briefly review the Fair Housing Act again. We don't know who's joining us for the first time, so it's important to kind of have that foundation. So the Fair Housing Act, here we're talking about the Federal Fair Housing Act that prohibits discrimination in housing-related transactions because of race, color, religion, national origin, sex, disability, or familial status. And we'll kind of break that down a little bit further. So what is a housing transaction? So housing transaction includes anything, in acquiring a home, including rent, sales, home mortgages, appraisals, and homeowners insurance. I think it's important to know that it's not just rent or sales. It could be at the other end of a housing transaction. So maybe when you're trying to sell your home, anytime you kind of engage in these situations, you're going to be protected by the Fair Housing Act to some degree. An important question, who must follow these rules? The way that I have learned it and has been shared with me is anyone who can deny you housing. So that includes landlords, real estate agents, lenders, insurance companies, homeowners associations is another big one. And anyone who kind of works for these people, or anyone who's associated or contracted for these kind of bigger groups, I guess, yeah. And then to further break down the Fair Housing Act, so race, that in the act refers to your lineage or your heritage or where your family might come from. Color is distinguished in the Fair Housing Act, and that is describing the literal color of your skin. Disability is anything that inhibits a major life activity. A major life activity is, anything like walking, talking, breathing, and it is both physical and mental disability. Sex refers to both sexual harassment and it also is protected with gender identity and sexual orientation. The last two are not explicitly said in the act, but they are enforced in that way. Today, we're going to be touching more on national origin. So national origin is where you or your family may be from. It also includes speaking a different language. Kind of this touches back on that first part that we went over, which was, like social security to live somewhere of you that's necessary. That's kind of falls under, might be a fair housing violation under national origin. Religion is whether you practice a religion or not, and if that is being used against you to deny housing. And then finally, families with children is a family that has any child under 18. This includes pregnant women and any sort of like custody. So grandparents or foster parents are also protected under families with children. Thank you. Joe's next.
All right, so we're going to dive in now. A specific case that a lot of us in the fair housing community have been paying attention to, specific to national origin-based discrimination and how this may or may not be affecting immigrant families. This is an important case. It's in the Fourth Circuit. It's Waples v. Reyes. I believe the full name is Waples v. Reyes Mobile Home Park. And then I have the or Mobile Home Park Limited Partners. And you can find that case at 91 F 4th 270. This case has gone back and forth between the Fourth Circuit Court and the District Court. I believe it's been reversed and remanded as of January for the third time, is what I'm understanding. I did some review of it this morning. The facts of this case are actually quite common. For anyone who practices fair housing law or has engaged in immigrant communities while doing housing work, honestly, this is probably the most common fact pattern I come across when it comes to immigrant communities. In this particular case, a housing provider made a new rule that said all tenants must show proof of lawful status. That included showing proof of a social security number. And there were about 9 female Latino tenants who were undocumented and did not have social security numbers and could not show the lawful status requirement. They filed a case of disparate impact. Let me back up real quick for those of us who are not extremely familiar with disparate impact. Under the fair housing law, there are 2 types of violations. One is differential treatment or disparate treatment, basically saying I'm intentionally treating you differently than I'm treating other people. Differential impact or disparate impact is I have a rule. It applies to everybody the same. Okay, so same here. Everyone has to show me a social security number to live here. White, black, Hispanic, French, Canadian, American, whatever it is, everybody must show that social security number and proof of lawful status to live here. But over time, it's going to have a disparate impact on a certain group of people. And that group of people are members of a protected class, okay? So in this particular situation, that rule applies to everybody. But after the course of a certain amount of time, you look around the room and realize that there's really only a certain number of us that are being negatively impacted or consequenced by this rule. And it just so happens all of us are of a different national origin or of the same national origin that we share, but it's different from everyone else. That's what happens here, and that's what happens all across America. Housing providers have these Social Security number rules, or you have to show lawful status. The reason why this is so tricky and why this case keeps going up and down between the district court and the circuit court is that national origin is protected, not documented status. Now, you might live in a state or a jurisdiction, a county or a city that does protect citizenship status, but the Federal Fair Housing Act does not protect citizenship status or lawful resident status. It only protects national origin. So this particular case is having a disparate impact on national origin, but the rule itself is not a violation of the Fair Housing Act. So what the most recent case at the Fourth Circuit said was they were looking at whether or not this passes the prongs or the test for a disparate impact case. The first prong of that test is you have a protected class that is able to move forward and identify a rule that is negatively impacting a group of people. The defense of this first prong, so the defense that moves forward is their first defense is to say, yes, that's true. It does have a negative impact on a certain group of people, but we have a legitimate business purpose for our rule. And that's what the court in January was looking at. Well, what the defense was trying to argue, and again, this is a very common case. This fact pattern has been going on for years. The defense was arguing that we don't want to be considered harboring fugitive, undocumented immigrants, okay? So by letting them live here, we are violating immigration law of harboring, which is an immigration/criminal statute at the federal level. And so that was a legitimate business reason. You can't ask us to look the other way and be guilty of harboring these individuals. Well, when the court looked at that argument, they said, well, your behavior around your fear of harboring doesn't stack up. Number one, you didn't evict the people. When they were unable to show you proof of lawful status, rather than denying them housing, you actually charged them higher rents. That is not a reflection of your actual fear of harboring undocumented individuals. That's an example of you exploiting their undocumented status for your profit. So the court is saying you're failing the business purpose because a fear of harboring is not a reasonable defense. When the circuit court said that, that was actually a pretty big victory in the world of fair housing on behalf of immigrant communities, because we're getting closer and closer to this ultimate question, which is, can you have undocumented based discrimination without national origin based discrimination, or are they one and the same? Now, next week, we're going to be covering LGBTQ rights, but about 3-4 years ago, we had a very important case, Bostock v. Clayton County, which we're going to talk about at length next week. What that was ultimately saying is that you cannot have sexual orientation discrimination without it being sex discrimination. This Waples case, while this isn't the question in front of the court, it's getting us closer to, can you have undocumented based discrimination without having national origin based discrimination, or are they one and the same? Now, this is just me hopping, getting off script a little bit, but my personal view is I personally have a social security number and lawful status because I was born here. Everybody who is born here, whose national origin is of the United States, will always 100% of the time be able to satisfy a rule that says you have to have lawful status here. The only people who are applying for housing that will not be able to satisfy that rule is anybody born outside of the US who has not acquired lawful status yet. So 100% of the time, that rule is going to affect people of different national origins. The way I look at it is that you can't have undocumented discrimination without it also being national origin-based discrimination. Are there cases that can prove me wrong? Most likely, yes. But the way my mind works is that it's one and the same. Okay. And this is one of those cases that I think is getting closer to at least kind of presenting that question or creating case precedent that allows us to say in Waples, they recognize that you can't have one without the other. Do we have it yet? No, but I think we're getting there. All right, I'm going to move on to the next slide here. Another current event that we've been paying attention to in the immigrant community is last July, the Florida immigration law of Senate Bill 1718 went into effect. Now, I'm going to go through this law, and you'll realize at the end, well, he never mentioned anything about housing, but we're going to talk about where it does connect. So this law that went into effect in July 2023, first of all, I think the one that hit the news, or the part of it that really alerted people the most, is that it reclassified or it redefined what human smuggling in the state of Florida is considered to be. So if you travel into the state of Florida and you are assisting somebody without lawful status to enter the state of Florida, you can be considered violating crimes against human smuggling. So if I'm a 16-year-old who was born in the United States and I take my mother, who is undocumented, across the state line, we have a nice little weekend in Savannah, Georgia, and then on Sunday night we drive back to Florida, I could be violating human smuggling. Okay, I could be arrested for that and charged with human smuggling. This would also include certain things like a teacher or a bus driver who's taking a school of high school athletes. Maybe 2 or 3 of those high school athletes are undocumented. They drive to another state for a soccer match, football game, whatever it is. And when they drive back after the game, the bus driver could be considered human smuggling. You can kind of go down the list of there are going to be a lot of scenarios where somebody is considered human smuggling. Then what's happened in the state of Florida is that a lot of our agricultural workers who are migrant and they work on the seasons, when a certain growing seasons in Florida come and go, a lot have left Florida up the coast and they work in Georgia and North Carolina, and they've just said we're not coming back because we can't get back in. Or nobody wants us to give us a ride back in because they will be charged with human smuggling. So little by little throughout the last year, in fact, I just read an article about it the other day on NPR. They kind of gave like 10 months later, what's Florida looking like? We have lost a lot of our migrant farm workers because as they travel with the seasons, they're not coming back, okay? Another one, part of this law was that hospitals are now required to ask the citizenship status of all patients. Even if you answer the question that says, no, I don't have lawful status, the hospital still provides services to you. They just have to ask the question. So it doesn't matter what your answer is. It just means that you can say, I am a lawful resident, I am not a lawful resident, or I choose not to answer. It's just that the hospital has to ask the question. The law increased penalties for the E-Verify. It's mandatory for employers, and employers who do not follow the E-Verify rules are going to be penalized even more so. This has to do with anybody hired after July 1st, 2023. Where this went into a little bit of chaos was prior to the law going into place, we had a lot of immigrant families saying, should I quit my job now and go somewhere else? And we were all saying, actually, quitting your job now is a bad idea because if you need to get hired after July 1st, you won't be able to. If you already had a job prior to July 1st, your employer wasn't going to have to go back and E-Verify you. But anything after July 1st was going to be underneath the new higher charges or higher penalties for employers who don't follow that rule. The state of Florida also does not recognize undocumented residents who have out-of-state driver's licenses. So I believe right now there's 13, maybe up to 20 states. I forget the number. It changes every year. There's a handful of states that allow for undocumented residents to have driver's licenses. If you are undocumented and you bring one of those licenses into Florida, you are still going to be considered driving without a license, which in the state of Florida, 3 driving without a license charges is a felony, okay? And felony charges are going to have higher repercussions for any sort of immigration benefit down the road. Dreamers, so people who are benefiting from DACA are going to be no longer allowed to practice law. This comes as a huge gut punch for a lot of dreamers who are going to college and ready to go to law school or graduating law school, and then suddenly they are not allowed to participate as a member of the bar of the Florida bar. This law also increased cooperation with the state with ICE, and then it provides additional funding for Unauthorized Alien Transport Act. So you can see all those bullet points, none of them had anything to do with housing or the Fair Housing Act itself. But if you look closer at this law, who is it actually punishing? It's punishing the people that help. So if you are helping somebody who is undocumented, you're the one who's going to get in trouble. You're the one guilty of human smuggling. Okay. The hospital has to be the ones who ask the question. The employer is the one who's going to get dinged. Okay. It's really more about creating fear into the community of the immigrant community. And what it's also doing on the flip side is that it's empowering a lot of landlords and housing providers to be discriminatory. We have heard a lot of stories, and I feel like our numbers have gone up as far as immigrant families reporting to us higher rates of discrimination. And they all say that their landlords suddenly got mean and aggressive after this law went into effect in July. We've had a lot of conversations where we really try to pick apart, is there a fair housing violation occurring in your life? And we'll ask the question, when did this start? And a lot of them will say, once that law went into effect, my landlord got mean. Now, sometimes the landlord now feels empowered and entitled, and my discrimination is going to be backed up by the government because we're passing laws like this, so I feel free to discriminate however I like. A lot of times, though, a law like this put fear into landlords and housing provider because they don't know that it's not against the law to rent to somebody who is undocumented. But pass a law like this, and a lot of housing providers are going to say, maybe it's just easier to back off and rent to somebody else. Okay. We don't really know the ins and outs of this law, but it looks like if there's any case to be made that we are assisting an undocumented family, we're on the wrong side of this law. Okay, so a lot of landlords and housing providers have increased their discriminatory actions and behaviors because laws like this are going into effect in the state of Florida. Another update I want to give, and this is as of yesterday. In fact, if there's anyone on the call from any of these organizations, the Fair Housing Centers, the Hope Fair Housing Center, Fair Housing Center, Greater Palm Beaches, feel free to jump in. I'd love to hear from you. But as of yesterday, a lawsuit was filed. The Asian Real Estate Association of America, NAFA, Hope, Fair Housing Center, Greater Palm Beaches, and I believe Relman Colfax is part of this case. They're filing a lawsuit against Florida's Senate Bill 264. This was that lawsuit that identified, I believe it was 6 or 7 countries, that if you are a citizen of one of those countries, you can no longer own property in the United States with certain details around it. Like you can't own a home within 10 miles of a military facility. You can't own a single family home within 5 miles of a military facility. You cannot own any agricultural land if you are a citizen of, I believe it was China, Russia, Cuba, Venezuela, North Korea, Syria, and I think I'm forgetting one more. But the language from the law itself, it says that it generally restricts the issuance of government contracts or economic development incentives to or real property ownership by foreign principals, which are certain individuals and entities associated with foreign countries of concern. And then there's an extra bullet point specifically to Chinese government, Chinese political parties, people who are domiciled in China but are not U.S. citizens. There's an extra bullet point that really goes heavy on people who are of Chinese descent. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna come back to that question here in just a second. So the lawsuit was filed yesterday trying to claim this is a violation of the Fair Housing Act. The lawsuit claims that the law denies access to housing to people from China and other named countries. The law alleges that it is not able to purchase housing on the same terms and conditions as other people. The law contains discriminatory statements. And then it also puts in a constitutional rights to equal protection has been violated in this law. Again, this was just filed yesterday, so I don't have any updates on it other than this is something that is taking place. If anyone in the chat box knows more about this law or is a member to it, please feel free to jump in. I'd love to add to the discussion. I do see a question in the chat box. I believe it had to do with the previous slide. Let me go back to it. It says, what is the implication of Senate Bill 1718 on interstate commercial transportation, such as buses or train service, or does it only target individuals? That's a great question. Honestly, it's anybody who assists. So if I'm an uncle living in, Michigan, and I give money to a relative who is going to Florida and they are not documented, I can be violating Florida's law against human smuggling because I'm assisting the person entering the state. So I think the answer there is if it's commercial transportation, yeah, I think the corporation might be on the hook, which I think you bring up a great idea is that a lot of these companies now are going to be encouraged to discriminate against their customers and to do racial profiling. I don't know a whole lot of stories that are coming out from that right now, but I'm guessing that they intentionally made it gray so that they could say, hey, if this business is going to discriminate, that's on them. We wrote our law the way we wrote our law. But I love that question because you can see how it creates an explosion of the gray area of the law of who's going to be in trouble for it. There's another question. Do you have any thoughts regarding the recent lawsuit mentioned? Yeah, my personal thoughts on this lawsuit that was filed yesterday is that the law is so specifically that it identifies Chinese people who are living in China but are not US citizens cannot purchase property. That's an easy one to say. I am a foreign national coming to the US. Maybe it's to go to school, maybe it's to move my family, maybe it's business, and I'm looking for a house. Well, I'm not allowed to buy one because I'm from China. To me, that is just blatant violation of the Fair Housing Act. That's my thoughts on it. And I think that's what they're trying to do with the lawsuit is keep it as simple as possible. Because if you look at the points they're alleging, this is just Fair Housing 101 stuff. Different terms and conditions. It denies access. There's really not a whole lot of intricate and complex arguments to be made because the law itself very specifically says these people cannot buy homes in the US because they are from this country. That sounds like national origin-based discrimination to me. What I can tell you is that in the last 10 months since this law has gone into effect, we're talking about the individuals who cannot purchase property if you're from one of these countries. I have heard a lot of reports of real estate agents not answering the phone for Asian clients. So Asian names calling up, I'm interested in purchasing a home in Florida. They're just not getting calls back. A lot of real estate agents are saying, I'm just not going to deal with it. I don't want to be in that situation. So I'm just going to go to the next caller and call them back and then show them homes and stuff like that. So a lot of Chinese and then Asian families in general are being passed on as potential clients from real estate agencies. So we already do see an impact on that. Great questions. So what I want to, and then are there any other states something similar? I haven't heard if other states are passing similar laws. I don't know. Does anyone else? I'm sorry for the dinging. That's that's on me. I haven't heard any other states passing similar laws. If they have, I haven't looked up what they're passing or what their specific language is looking like. I know Florida likes to remember July 2023. Both of these laws were passed right when the DeSantis campaign was at its strongest running for president. So a lot of people say these laws were passed for political reasons only. And now that DeSantis is not in the race anymore, we're left with these laws and we don't know if they're going to stick around or not. I think the courts will decide whether or not these laws get to stick around. Great questions. So when it comes to these laws, and what it means to practice fair housing in immigrant communities, there's a little bit of a different twist or approach that a lot of lawyers have to take. One of the things that's happening a lot in our country, definitely in Florida, and definitely in Florida in like farm worker communities where these laws are having the most impact, is that a lot of families are adapting to the discrimination. Okay, a lot of these families risk their lives to be in the United States, and they're done risking. So we made it. We're here. Breathe easy. Let's just go to work and stay quiet. we're just going to adapt to the discrimination because American discrimination is better than what we were escaping from. That's kind of the mentality that a lot of families move forward with. I've done a lot of work in farm worker communities, and a lot of them are interested in knowing their rights, but not always interested in exercising those rights. It's just easier to adapt than it is to move forward. This moves to the idea that it's kind of a don't rock the boat mentality. Exercising our rights means exposing ourselves. And if we're going to rock the boat for something better, we might actually lose what little we have. And what little we have is so much better than what we were coming from. However, on the flip side of that, a lot of members of these communities are happy to rock the boat. Just tell me where. Yeah, tell me where to rock it. But there's a lack of awareness of rights. If I'm an immigrant to a new country, I didn't grow up studying the rights of that country. I don't know the Bill of Rights and all these, technical, complex protections that the laws are offering. When we do community education and outreach in immigrant communities, a lot of times these are the most hands go up in these, attendee or audiences, because this is the first time they're hearing of such rights. We didn't know this was against the rules. We don't know the difference between disparate impact, differential treatment, and everything like that. So lack of awareness of rights is such a big deal in immigrant communities that I would love to rock the boat, but I don't know what boat I'm supposed to be rocking. And then add to that, there's always a lack of accessibility to resources and advocacy. There's so many families out there that say, thank you so much for educating us of our rights, but who do we reach out to? Who are we supposed to help us fight these fights? If I wanted to exercise my rights, I don't know where to go. We're too isolated in a lot of these communities. I want to look at the chat box real quick. There's some great comments being made. Shania mentioned that more than 20 states are in the process of passing new restrictions on foreign land purchases or updating existing laws, according to data from the nonprofit National Agriculture Center. That's after at least 15 states passed laws. Okay, so the answer is yes. A lot of other states are passing similar laws, and if they haven't already, they are going to. And then we have a comment, by not fighting the disparate treatment at the present moment and accepting the maybe higher rent or other charges, do they waive their defenses if they change their mind in the future because the abuse is getting worse? Great question. Okay, under the Fair Housing Act, if you're going to file an administrative complaint, you have 1 year from the time that the last incident of discrimination occurred. Well, you might be thinking, well, what is a discriminatory incident when it's disparate impact? Because disparate impact is a collection of data that says when this rule was implemented, it took time for the numbers to shuffle out. Just if I have a rule that says everybody has to have a social security number here, it's going to take a year or two before I look around and say, hey, that rule worked. Nobody from another country lives here. It's not because there's not going to be any data the first day after that rule went into effect. It's going to take a year or two for that data to be collected and say, look at the impact that this rule is having. As far as waiving a defense, you're not waiving it by saying, fine, I'll go ahead and pay the higher rent, because the rule is still impacting you. Paying that rent is the consequence. Okay, you're being given an extra cost, an extra penalty. That penalty is a higher rent. So by paying it, you're basically accepting the penalty, which is the violation of the Fair Housing Act. But if you wait too long, you might run the course of the statute of limitations on the administrative claim. Under the civil action, you have 2 years from the last incident of discrimination. The only time in my experience, and I'd love if other people have more experience than I do, when you waive your right to file a fair housing claim is that if you settle something that says, I hereby waive, my rights to move forward with any, claim rising from the same incident or something like that. Usually the folks who are waiving the rights or claims are going to be the landlords when they accept rent. By accepting rent, you're allowing the person to live there. You're recognizing a landlord-tenant relationship has been established when you accept somebody's rent. By paying it, especially if you're being discriminated against, if the other option is homelessness, you're not waiving your right to file a claim. You're simply trying to keep a roof over your head. Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah. So I think we've shown this slide before, but it has a greater impact in immigrant communities. And the reason is because it's not as easy of saying, if you or someone you know should, give us a call. Well, how do we find them? How do people in immigrant communities learn about us in the first place? This is the part where I kind of go off on a little tangent and I talk about the importance of community lawyering. Community lawyering is the idea that says if the lawyer sits around and waits for the phone to ring, you're not going to get any calls from certain vulnerable communities. And immigrant communities and families are part of that group. They don't have your business card on the refrigerator door unless you actually gave it to them. Well, they're not living in communities where they're coming into your office and grabbing that business card. You have to go find them. So Pia, myself, and a lot of members from our team and a lot of the fair housing programs throughout the state and country, we do a lot of outreach and education where we go into immigrant communities and we present this presentation. We will participate in community resource fairs. I know Pia and I have actually participated in like food drives where we just help participate in a food drive event and we put our brochures in people's boxes of food, or when people pull up in their cars, they roll it on their window, we'll have little short conversations with them while we hand them a brochure to educate them of their rights. This is our phone number, this is who we are, this is what we do. We're Florida Legal Services, so our services come free, something like that. It's not enough to just say we haven't really had a phone call from an immigrant family in a long time. Well, that's because we haven't gone down to find them. So it's all about advocacy, partnerships, networking, and actually planting yourself in that community. Well, just because you're in the community doesn't mean now everyone feels comfortable calling you. I know in my experience, I spent about a couple of years working in farm worker communities before they felt comfortable reaching out to me, building that trust, building that rapport, actually showing people that you're ready to walk that talk kind of a thing. And that's where, like, for example, participating in a food drive gives us a lot of street credit. When people see us sweating in the 95-degree summer heat, putting groceries in people's trunks, there's a little bit more street credit that says this is someone I trust giving a call to with my housing complaint. Because remember, back to that other slide, a lot of families and immigrant communities do not want to rock the boat. So they're not going to call a stranger. They're only going to contact someone that they feel comfortable with, they trust. Okay. Because if this person I call is not someone I can trust, I'm rocking the boat with a stranger. Okay. So you can kind of put all of that together and realize it's not enough to just say, here's my business card, that you have to do so much more. So once you do have that trust, though, organization like ourselves, we help people file complaints with the Department of Housing and Urban Development, Florida Commission on Human Relations. There's other FAP organizations, City of Orlando. And throughout the state, I believe City of Tampa is also FAP, Broward County, Jacksonville. There's different commissions and investigatory bodies that can do fair housing investigations in concert with HUD and HUD grants. And once you file that complaint, we can help people navigate the system. One of the hardest parts of navigating the system is reminding clients that it takes time for an investigation to take place. A lot of the navigation means waiting, which is not a bad thing. It just means that you're waiting for an investigation to occur. A lot of immigrant families don't like having their name on something while they wait. I know in my experience, immigrant families are the squeakiest of the wheels. They're the ones saying, if this isn't going to be done soon, then go ahead and let's withdraw and take my name off because I don't want anything to happen to me in the meantime. What I'm getting at is I think immigrant families more than anybody, especially as these Florida laws are getting passed, they're the ones who are most worried about retaliation. Okay, I'm an undocumented immigrant, or maybe I'm documented, but it was so hard for me to find my housing. The last thing I want to do is lose it. I would rather put up with the abuse, the discrimination, than be homeless, because being homeless as an undocumented immigrant isn't just wait till you find the next place to live. It's not a matter of going through apartment listings. It's about networking. If you're undocumented in the United States looking for housing, it's about who you know and having the degrees of connection to landlords that are going to rent to you. So rocking the boat comes at a much higher risk. So filing a complaint, the fears of retaliation are, amplified. Now, retaliation is absolutely against the rules of the Fair Housing Act. If you exercise a right, such as filing a fair housing complaint, it cannot be used against you as a reason to deny housing. But as I just got done mentioned, part of navigating the process is waiting. A lot of people lose housing while a complaint is filed, and there's a lot of emergency relief needed in the process, a lot of balls in the air. I often remind families that under Fair Housing Act, the relief you see will probably come later down the road. And so I can tell you retaliation is against the law, but I can't go to your landlord's house and put my finger in his chest and say, you will not retaliate against my clients. And a lot of immigrant families know that a landlord who's a bad actor is fine breaking the law because they know that their immigrant tenants are less likely to file complaints. They're less likely to exercise their rights. So landlords feel empowered to retaliate and deny housing more often against immigrant families than others, which is why navigating this process is that much more important. I think that actually takes us to the end of the slides. I would love to hear from everybody's questions and comments, or if you guys have some experiences of your own you'd like to share. Now is a good time. Thank you guys so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you, Joe and Pia. This is awesome. I mean, every time you have a new session, I'm like, I thought that was everything. And there's always more that you have to teach us. So folks, while you all are getting ready to drop additional questions into the chat or the Q&A, I'll take up some airtime with, the CLE certificate information. Additionally, I think I've been able to do this throughout our sessions. If anybody does want to pose a question verbally, meaning out loud, being taken off mute, we understand that there are a lot of factual scenarios and things that are difficult to write down into the chat or the Q&A. So please feel free to raise your hand, and Joe, Pia, and I will keep an eye out to see if anyone's raised their hand, take you off mute so you can pose your question. And so let me quickly grab that. I do see that some hands are raised. So first, in no particular order, I'm going to allow Courtney the ability to talk, and then we'll go over to Leslie next. Let me see. Okay, Courtney, you should be able to. Okay, perfect. I see you're off mute, and I'm just going to lower your hand, and feel free to feel free to ask your question.
Thank you. So I had a case that involved a Latina woman who her complaint was that at the renewal of her lease, at the end of her lease, the landlord increased the rate. And when she went, she was concerned. She's like, oh, why are you increasing the rate? And we, of course, know that you can increase rent at any point after the expiration. But she thought it was odd because she felt like only the Latinos were being given this increase at the end of their term. And then when she went online, she noticed that the rent for her same apartment was decreased. And she questioned the landlord, like, okay, what's the deal with this? And she never really kind of got any help through that. And I'm trying to remember the advice that I gave, but I'm just curious if you've seen that kind of scenario. And ultimately, if you have, what would have been a good, way to advise her on how to handle that matter?
Yeah, okay, great question, great scenario. You're right. Non-renewals or renewals with an increase in rent, it's not a violation of Florida law. They didn't break any rules, but they broke the Fair Housing Act if they only did it for Latino families. The hard part there, and this, I'm sure this happened with you and this happens with me all the time, is I ask the client, how do you know other Latino families, right? And the answer is, well, I heard some things.
Right. And that unfortunately was hers too. Yeah, I heard.
Right. And so the attorney mind is like, well, I'm not going into court and telling the judge, look, we heard some things, just trust us, right? What I've been told, I don't know if this is helpful, but the good parts about the administrative process of filing a HUD complaint is that it opens the door to an investigation. Filing a complaint, triggering an investigation, you don't have to have beyond a reasonable doubt evidence. You don't even have to have preponderance of the evidence to file that complaint. What you're doing in that moment is you're being an advocate that triggers the investigation, and then the investigator is going to be the one who asks those questions. If you heard things, who are the people you heard things from? I'd like to call them as witnesses. And if the investigation can actually create the evidence that we thought we might have, now you have something.
That's good.
Yeah, that's the advice I've been given. And the more I do that, the more impressed I am with how investigations are uncovering that evidence that, would be hearsay without an actual paper trail.
No,
That's what I would do in that situation. The hard thing the hard thing with immigrant communities is asking the tenant themselves, where are you getting your information? A lot of them are like, I'd like to be my own detective, but there's no way I'm rocking that boat. And so you asked a question that I'm just going to smile and say, never mind to. Yeah, so I think you get where I'm getting at. It helps having an investigator say, we'll take it from here. I think that's the idea.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Courtney. I'm going to mute you now. And then I am going to allow Leslie to ask her question. And Leslie, you have the ability to talk. I'm going to lower your hand and please feel free. Leslie? All right, maybe it was an error. Sometimes people raise their hands. What I'll do is I'm going to disable the talking, and please re-raise your hand if you would like to pose your question. So in the meantime, I dropped into the chat the CLE code. That's 240453, N as in Nancy. And what we have here is 1 general CLE credit, 1.0 immigration and nationality law, and also 1 state federal government administrative practice certification credits. Did anything else come into the chat or the Q&A that we saw? Awesome. I don't think so. Well, folks, last minute or two to ask questions. Again, I'll fill some airtime. Just thanking Joe and Pia for all that you do and really taking the time to teach us in the way that you teach us, which is just really matter of fact, really comfortable. It's really comfortable to learn from you both. So I appreciate it, and I believe the audience does as well. So also reminder, for those of you who are in the audience, our next part of this training series, I'm going to look at my calendar here, is next Tuesday. And we're looking, so that would be the 14th. And we're looking at pride in your home, LGBTQ plus fair housing rights, very exciting topic. And that will be, I think, the 4th installment of this training series, right? We are just chugging along, and it has been too much fun. I don't want it to end. Remember, folks, we have 6. So tomorrow will be next week will be number 4, and then that's followed by on the 21st we have dwelling in safety, VAWA rights, and fair housing, and then our final session will be on the 28th of May, and that will be called Fairness for Families, Fair Housing for Families with Children. So we get out a little bit early today. I'll take it. No need to hold you all. Thank you for attending. We'll see you at the next one. Joe and Pia, thank you so much. Looking forward to next week.
Of course. Thank you so much. And thanks for everyone who came. We appreciate it.
All right. Bye, everybody.